everybody, and welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. In this video, it's going to be part 3 of our little mini series on building up a multiple authentication system in Laravel using all of the native authentication scaffolding and facades and everything. Okay, so the first video of this series, if you're just jumping into this video and you're confused while going through it, just keep in mind this is the third part of the series, and if you want to see how we built up the guards and everything like that, you're going to want to go to the first video or at least watch the playlist, and all those links will be down in the description. So the first video, we set up an admin model and our user model, and then we went ahead and configured them, and we now have a guard for each of them. We have the admin guard and the web guard. The web guard protects for users, the admin guard protects for admins or our employees or whatever we want to call them. Okay, so that worked out great. In the last video, we set up our login forms. So now we have a login form for admin and a login form for users, and that's working beautifully. But we still have one last problem. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, is basically how to solve this one last thing, which is all about redirects. And it's making sure you get redirected to the right place. And of course, this is just a problem because Laravel is when you run your authentication scaffolding, by default, you just have the one, there's just the one type of user, right? So it's all set up and basically hard-coded for that one type of user. And that's what we need to configure, is we need to say, hey, there's now multiple types of users. Let's set it up for multiple users and make sure it redirects to the right place depending on the user. So let me show you guys the problem real quick. We'll just illustrate it here in the browser, and then I'll talk to you guys about the solution. Just want to make sure you guys understand what the problem is before we try to solve the problem that you may not understand. So let's start by going to the home page. Now the home page is for users only, right? We have a authentication middleware in there. So if someone is not authenticated as a user, they're going to get kicked off of the home page and sent to the login page. For the users, right? And sure enough, we click home and it redirects us to the user login page, as we would expect. That's actually normal. That's normal because it is hard-coded to always go to the /login page. We're going to want to make this more dynamic, but at least it does provide the functionality we need. Now the problem we see is when we try to go to the admin page. Now if we go to the admin page, we're trying to go somewhere that only admins are allowed. You would expect then, if we're not authenticated, that it redirects us to the admin login page so that we could log in as an admin. But what happens if you click this and you click enter? Well, I'm logged in as an admin. All right, let's log out real quick. Let's try that again, /admin. And now you can see, since I'm not logged in as an admin, it redirects us to the user login page. And that's not expected. We would normally expect it to take us to an admin login page so that we can then fill out the form, log in, and then go back to our intended page. And that's not going to be functionality we get here now. We would have to manually type in admin/login in order to get there. Okay, so that is one problem that we've got. Let's see, the other problem that we have with redirects is now if we're logged in and we're going to a page protected by guest middleware. So let's see how we can recreate this. I'll show you guys what's going on with this one. This is, again, if you're using the guest middleware, which we currently use our guest middleware on our login forms, but you might have guest middleware throughout the rest of your application. But when you use your guest middleware, what happens if someone is currently logged in and they go to a page with your guest middleware? Normally it would redirect them to like the dashboard or home page for that user, because they're not allowed to access the page they're trying to access because it's protected by the guest middleware. But we get kind of weird results when we do this here. So let's demonstrate this. Let's actually log in now as a admin. We're going to log in. Okay, so now that we're logged in as an admin, what we would do, let's try now to access something protected by the admin guest middleware. That would be the login page, right? So let's go to admin/login and click it. And where does it take us? It takes us to the normal login page. Now, why is that happening? This is confusing. What it's actually trying to do is, because we're protected, it thinks that we are logged in, right? It doesn't really know that there's multiple, it hasn't really been programmed for multiple user types. So what happens is when we try to access admin/login, the guest middleware will catch on and say, hey, you can't do this. You're logged in. You're already logged in as an admin. And so it's like, let's just redirect you. So it falls back on a redirect and then it redirects them. Well, once again, that redirect URL is hard-coded for the users. And so it ends up sending us to the user dashboard, which is the /home. Well, we're not then the next problem is then we're not authenticated as a user, so then /home then kicks us out and sends us to the user login because that's what's hard-coded for that. Okay, so there's two different problems that we got, and they're both related to middleware. So if that makes sense, I know there's a lot going on there, but basically the two problems we have is we want to make sure that if we are logged in, that if there's a authentication middleware requiring you to be logged in as a certain type of user, we want to make sure that it redirects you to the login page for that type of user. Okay, that's the first problem we want to solve. The second problem we want to solve is that if you are trying to go to a page protected by a guest middleware for a specific guard, and you're logged in as that guard, we want to make sure that you get redirected to the correct page for that guard, not just always /home. Okay, so those are kind of the two things we got to worry about with redirects. So let's dive into the app and see how that works. First things first, we need to understand, I guess, what's happening. There's two different types of middleware that basically happens. We can see the middleware in our app and then providers, or not providers, our HTTP and then kernel. And you can kind of see what's happening down here. So we've got, whenever we're using the auth middleware, like this one right here, you can see that it actually uses this authenticate is the middleware. Okay, so we're using this authenticate middleware, and this is actually in our foundation. This is in the vendor folder for the root of the application. Now, when we use our guest middleware, it's using this middleware called redirect if authenticated, and this is actually in our app folder. So this is pretty easy to access. Now, this one we usually don't want to edit hard codes, like the stuff in your vendor folder. You really don't want to edit that because it can't be saved to your repository, or it's hard to upgrade and stuff like that. And luckily, we don't really need to edit this hard code. Even though it's using the authenticate middleware that's in the Illuminate folder, it actually throws an exception. So we can actually just build upon the exception that it throws, which is in our app folder here, instead of having to change the hard code for Laravel. Okay, so when you run the authenticate middleware and you're not authenticated, what it does is it throws an exception to redirect you to the login page. And that exception that it throws is actually handled up here under App Exceptions Handler. And then down here at the very bottom, we have a protected function called unauthenticated. And you can see that it comes in as an authentication exception. Okay, so when that middleware runs and you're not authenticated, it throws this exception, this unauthenticated exception. So we can actually edit what happens when you're unauthenticated by just editing the code in this exception handler. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Well, first, start by just taking a look at what's happening. First of all, we see we have an if statement here. The if statement is checking to see whether the current request is expecting JSON in return. What this would normally mean if a request is expecting JSON in return, this would be an API request. Okay, so the user is submitting something via an API, and so they're responding back and forth with JSON instead of a full web request. And so if that's the case, we just want to reply back in JSON, right? That makes sense. So that's what happens here. So if it's expecting JSON, then we'll give it JSON. That's exactly what we do. So we send back a response. We're not allowed to view the page, so we send back a response in JSON, and we simply send it this response. So we say error unauthenticated. All right, and then they know they're not authenticated. And then with that, we attach an HTTP code called a 401 HTTP code. All right. Now, that basically solves our API. So if they're logging with an API, we really don't need to customize that. We'll just let that be the response regardless of what our API, of which guard they're trying to access. We're just going to send back the generic unauthenticated, and that works. Now, with the user is where we really need to make sure we don't get the user confused. So if the user is trying to access a user backend, we want to redirect them to the user login. If they're trying to access the admin backend, we want to redirect them to the admin login. Okay, and so that's what we're going to do down here. You can see that by default, it's just hard-coded to just always redirect us to this route, this login route. So it's always to the generic user login page, no matter what. So what we're going to want to do here is add some logic to see which guard they're using, and then depending on the guard they're using, we send them to the right login page. So let's go ahead and do that here. Let's get that set up. What we're going to do to start with is we're actually just going to we're going to pull the guard out of this exception. So this is, you can see up here we have this exception object, which is an authentication exception type. And inside this exception object, there is the guard that they're trying to access is in there. So let's just pull that out, and then we're going to see what the guard is equal to and then send it to the right place. So let's do that by, we're going to create a variable called guard, and we're going to set it equal to, we're going to create an array out of this exception. And then we're going to get the guards only. This passes in basically a collection, but we don't want that. We just want one item, the first item basically. And so this is going to just give us the string. So basically we should be getting, if we go to our config auth, we should be getting one of these in response. We should get web, API, admin, or admin API. We're going to get one of those 4 options. And theoretically, we shouldn't be getting admin API or API because those would be caught up here. So that leaves basically we would just be either getting web or admin. And of course, if you have more than this, then you might have more than just 2. But we basically are just going to have web or admin. So all we need to do is see whether guard is equal to web or admin and then send it to the right place. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use a switch statement here instead of an if, a bunch of if statements. We're going to switch against the guard variable. And the first thing I want to check is if we're using the admin guard. If we're using the admin guard, then we're going to tell it to go to the admin login. And we can do that with a variable called login and set that equal to our named route, which is login or admin.login. Okay, that's good. And then now down here, we'll just catch everything else, which should just be the web. But it might be the API. It shouldn't be. That really wouldn't work. So it'd be the web response. So with that, we'll just catch it as the default, and we'll just send it to the login. And that's basically our default login page if for any other option. Okay, so now we have this variable called login, which is equal to the name of the named route that we want to forward them to. So now down here, when we redirect them, let's just make this dynamic to go to that login variable. And that way, if they are trying to access the admin guard, it'll go to the admin login. If they're trying to access a different guard, like the web guard, it'll send them to the normal login. And that's it. Okay, so that's it for this one. Redirect, it's just going to redirect them now to that login page. So that now solves the problem of, if we go back to our kernel and look at our guards here. So we went ahead and solved this problem. So now if there is a page that is protected by Auth middleware, we will make sure to redirect them to the correct login page if they're not logged in. So that solves the first problem. The second problem is for pages protected by the guest middleware. The guest middleware only wants people that are not logged in. Okay, so if you're logged in, then we don't want you seeing that page. Instead, we normally would redirect you to the home page for that authentication. All right, so we want to redirect if authenticated. So this is what we're going to edit now. Let's go over here. It's just under the middleware folder, redirect if authenticated. So middleware, redirect if authenticated right there. And you can see what's going on here. So this is the middleware. Basically, it checks to see if we're logged in, and then it redirects us home. And then if we're not logged in, then it will come over here and just let us continue on and go to the request. Okay, remember this is middleware. So basically, next just means go to the next middleware and or just start loading the page. So basically what it does is it just sees, are we logged in? If we are logged in, then it redirects us to the /home, and that's just hard-coded. Otherwise, it continues on and lets us view the page and so forth. So this is actually pretty easy because we actually have this variable called guard, and it's available here. And of course, it could be equal to null if there's no guard specified, but by default, the guard will be equal to whatever guard we're trying to access in the middleware. So guard will either be equal to web or it'll be equal to admin as a string. Okay, so that's pretty easy. So because we have that right out of the box, we can actually do the same thing they did in the last one. We can just test against that guard and then redirect to the correct page depending on the guard that it is. Okay, so in order to do this, it gets a little bit different, but it's still not too bad. What we're going to do is we're going to create, I'm just going to comment that out here. And up here at the top, we're going to create another switch statement, right? Just like we did in the last time. And we're going to switch it against a guard once again. And then we're going to add our case value. and we want to check to see if it's trying to use the admin guard. We're logged as admin. We also now need to check that we are actually authenticated. We're going to use auth. We're actually going to want to make sure that we are inside of that same guard, okay? And check like that. And then here we can return, redirect, and we're going to redirect them to the route for, let's see, this is the admin, so admin.dashboard. Like that, okay? So we go into here, if they're an admin, if they are an admin, but let's say they're trying to access an admin page, then in that case, this is going to trigger because the guard is going to be equal to admin. Okay, so they're trying to access an admin page. Let's say they're logged in as a user, but not as an admin. Well, what would happen is they're going to enter this right here. Then they're going to go to the if statement, and it's going to say auth guard, and it's going to test it against admin. Well, if they're logged in as a user, but not an admin, then this is going to fail. So it's then not going to redirect them. Okay? In that case, it's actually going to break out of the switch statement and then just continue on with the request, which is the effect that we want, okay? Because you want that person, if it's only protected against, say, admins, and you're not logged in as an admin, but you're logged in as a user, we still want you to see that page then. Does that make sense? So in that case, we want to make this allowed, okay? And this will work. Now, if you're trying to access an admin and you're logged in as an admin, then this will succeed and it will redirect you to the admin dashboard. So that's what we want. Now down below, let's go ahead, and this will be for our, this will be for the normal user. Let's go ahead and do that. So for the user, there we go. We're going to test against that guard, and then if it's successful, we'll redirect them home, okay? So this is for users, this is for admins. Let's clear this up. And then if all else fails, we just let them return to the next request. Perfect. Okay, so let's try it out now. That's basically everything we need. I'm gonna have a written tutorial for this. This one's kind of hard to explain because, I don't know, there's like so many like redirects going on in middlewares. I had a hard time explaining it. If you're confused and you rewatch it and it still doesn't make sense, I'm gonna have a written tutorial that you can go. It's gonna be down below. It'll be on my website. It'll be written out, and hopefully in written form, I can make this make a lot more sense and you can understand it by reading it. So if you're confused on what's going on, I recommend reading the tutorial. Okay, so let's try this out now. So first of all, let's log in as a admin. Okay, so I tried to go to the admin page. I'm logged in as an admin already, it looks like. So because I'm logged, I was gonna say we would hope that it would redirect us to the admin login, but I'm logged in. So let's now try. I'm logged out of everything. So now let's try to access the admin homepage. We would hope now that if everything worked correctly, that it will redirect us to the admin login instead of the user login. So because it wasn't doing that at the beginning of the video. So we click it, and sure enough, we're on the admin login page. So that's a really, really good sign. And of course, as expected, if we go to the home page, this would redirect us to the user login. Okay, so that's a good sign. So we know that our redirect for the pages protected by authentication, it is redirecting us to the correct login form for that guard. So that's a good sign. The other thing we wanted to test is now if we are logged, if a page is protected by a guest and you're logged in from the guard that it's protecting against, then it will send you to the correct page for that guard. Okay? So the practical example of this, let's log in now as a admin again. Okay, so now to test this last part, what we're going to do is we are going to test, obviously we want to make sure if we go to admin login now, while we're logged as an admin, we would expect it to kick us out because admin login is protected by guest middleware. It's going to see we're currently logged in as admin and then redirect us to admin dashboard. Hopefully that works because before it would have redirected us to the home page for the user. So let's go and try it. Sure enough, it sends us now to the correct dashboard. So that's a good sign. If I try to go to the home page, right, I'm not logged in as a user. I'm only logged in as an admin. So if I'm trying to go to the home page, the authentication middleware should kick me out and send me to the login page for the user. And then that one should let me in. Even though I'm logged in as an admin, I'm not logged in as a user. So it should let me view the login page. So let's click enter. And sure enough, it does. The last test we can do is let's just go back and I'm going to log out now. We're going to log in as a user. Okay, so now I'm logged in as a user. And now that I'm logged in as a user, I want to try to go to our login page. It shouldn't let us. Perfect. It goes back to the correct dashboard, the user dashboard. And now let's try to go to the admin page. Of course, the admin page, we're not logged in as an admin. It should send us to the admin login. And it should let us see the admin login instead of redirecting us back to the user homepage, okay? Because we're logged in as a user, but not as an admin. And the login page for the admin is only protecting against admin guest and not all guests. All right, so we click it, and sure enough, admin login. It allows us to do this, and we could also now log in as both. All right, and now we should have access to basically everything. Okay, so home, admin, login, redirects us back home. Perfect. Admin/login redirects us to admin. So our page is working 100% as intended. So hopefully you guys found that interesting and informative. Now, if you guys are confused, I've got written instructions for all of this on a blog post, and the link for that is down in the description. I highly recommend you go over there. You might want to save this. All the code snippets are there. That's probably the easiest one to follow along now that you've seen it in action. And if you ever try to do this again, the instructions over there will be pretty easy, I think. All right, now if you guys, that basically sums up most of what we need to do for the multiple authentication in Laravel. If you do want to learn how to use password resets with multiple users, that will be the final video, the next video coming up. So I recommend you take a look at that one. But until next time, guys, have some fun in Laravel, and hit me up, by the way, if you guys have any questions or you just want to say thank you. I love hearing thanks from you guys, so you can hit me up on Twitter or you can email me, and I'll do my best to get back to you guys. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.